Hello again, and a very warm welcome to May's episode of Inside TYPO3. In this month's episode, we welcome Kendall Litton to the show, who has a special report for us from last month's TYPO3 General Assembly. Staying with the community theme, I sat down with former TYPO3 community manager Ben Van Tander to find out about the early days of the General Assembly and what being a community manager was like in the 2010s. But first, let's start off like we always do by catching up on all the latest release information. At the very end of April, we saw the release of TYPO3 version 13.1. With this release, we saw the introduction of site sets, an easy way to manage and move extension configuration settings between sites. Rendering pages in the front end got a lot easier with the introduction of the page view content object. 13.1 also includes significant improvements to the page tree, including native drag and drop support, improved API endpoints, enhanced virtual scroll, support for user preferences for light and dark mode, and write-in direction. In addition, TYPO3 now supports 3 new languages: Scottish Gaelic, Irish Gaelic, and Maltese. This month we also saw security releases for TYPO3 versions 11 and 12. Make sure to update your installations, as these releases contain important security fixes. Moving on to community extensions, we saw minor releases for Content Defender, Mail, Fluid View Helpers, and Content Blocks, which remains in beta. Moving on to events, the next TYPO3 Community Sprint takes place between the 10th and the 14th of June here in Dusseldorf. You can also meet members of the TYPO3 community during May at the AFUP des Poitiers in France and the Africa Digital Summit in Morocco. In early June, we'll have people at the Drupal Jam conference in the Netherlands and Head in the Cloud in northern Germany. And a big shout out goes to Tunisia's all-new TYPO3 user group, who had their inaugural meetup on the 15th of May. To find out more about any of these events and how you can get your event mentioned on the podcast, contact us at podcast@typo3.com. Next, I'd like to introduce and welcome Kendall Litton to the show, who's going to tell us about our first agency partner, Plan2Net.
Plan2Net, a leading IT service provider based in Vienna, specializes in open source solutions, utilizing TYPO3, along with Magento and Shopware for e-commerce to create dynamic web portals, and offering bespoke programming support with Symfony for business processes. With over 2 decades of experience, they provide expert consulting and implementation services that are both agile and adaptable, ensuring solutions that are scalable and effective. We're happy to welcome them as the first official Austrian partner on board the TYPO3 Partner Program. Discover how Plan2Net can transform your digital strategies by visiting plan2.net.
Next, we sent our new employee, Kendall Litton, out to speak with Mathias LEsniak, TYPO3 board member, to find out about the General Assembly, why we have it, what it does, and why it's quite unique in the open source world. We also apologise for the audio quality in the following interview. Due to illness and scheduling issues, we were forced to record this interview live from the e-governance conference in Estonia, and we thank Mathias for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast today, Mathias. Could you start with an introduction on your role and how you got involved with TYPO3?
Yes. So my name is Mathias LEsniak. I am the project ambassador for TYPO3, and I started with TYPO3 back in 2003 when I crashed my first TYPO3 installation, then tried to write my own CMS, and then crawled back to TYPO3 6 months later.
A long journey.
Yes, absolutely. But after that, I've only been using TYPO3. It's been it's the love of my life.
A loyalist.
Yes.
So for our conversation today, I wanted to talk about the General Assembly that took place last month in Zurich. It was my first time attending, so I recently wrote about my experience on the blog and my takeaways as a newcomer. But as a former board member, could you share an overview of what the General Assembly is, the format, why it's important, and a little bit about the democratic process?
So the TYPO3 Association is the organization that owns the TYPO3 brand and that supports the development of TYPO3, the CMS. And as a difference to many other open source projects, the TYPO3 Association is 100% democratic. That means that all of the members of the board are elected directly by the members. And that is also true for the Business Control Committee, which is also elected directly by the members in online elections. So the General Assembly is the annual meeting where all that has been going on is certified, and the budget for the next year is gone through. And that means the most interesting stuff actually is the stuff that goes on in the weeks coming up to the General Assembly. Firstly, we have the opportunity for people to register and nominate themselves as potential board members or business control committee members. Once we have the nominees in, we have elections where all of the members, all of the 1,000 plus members of the TYPO3 Association get the chance to vote for the people they think should help run TYPO3. And that is really an amazing process where anyone who's a member of the association can come in and help run TYPO3 for a 2-year term, and they can actually be re-elected indefinitely.
And what motivated you to become a board member, and what was your role like on the board?
So my motivation was that I found that the communication from the TYPO3 Association was substandard. And, you know, if you think that something is not up to scratch in open source, the best thing you can do is to take it on yourself. So I was invited to join the board, and I did so. And since then, I was responsible for the external communication of the TYPO3 Association. So in many ways, you could call it marketing, but it's really much broader. It's the public relations work and making sure that what the product and the association does is communicated out to the rest of the world. So that's what I did. And I did that so much that slowly, I was using more and more time. And finally, now since February, I've actually been employed by the TYPO3 Association to do much of what I did as a board member, just without the voting rights in the board and the possibility to 100% focus on making sure that TYPO3 is seen and working perfectly for people coming into the community.
So from this last General Assembly, and since it was your last General Assembly as a serving board member in that capacity, what were your big takeaways from it? And was there anything that surprised you about it, or was it more straightforward as it has been in the past?
I think what we managed at this General Assembly was to have a bit of discussion and questions coming in. Usually General Assemblies can be a bit boring. We just go through things and we do verification votes, and people say yes to yes, that vote was run correctly, and yes, that is how it should be. And what we managed this time was actually to get a bit of a conversation where people ask questions and the board could answer those questions. And I think that's really important in a democratic process, that you have these meeting places where people can talk with the people who make the decisions.
Since we're talking about involvement, discourse, and participation, what would your advice be to someone who's looking to get more involved, from joining the association to running for a board position?
Well, I think actually it starts before you become involved in the association. I think many people work in agencies that are maybe members of the TYPO3 Association, but they're not members themselves. I think the first and very important step is to become, for example, a community member. The price of that is under €8 a year, and you get one vote. And that is the same vote that a platinum member that pays €12,500 a year gets. So it's really your opportunity to have your voice heard. And then we really need people to become active and more active in making decisions in the TYPO3 community. And volunteering for the TYPO3 Association board is really taking the step up and saying that, well, I want to take part in showing the right way for TYPO3. I have some ideas, I have some knowledge, and I want to make that available to the TYPO3 project. So it's not only about being stepping up and spending time on board meetings. It's really about taking charge and directing the TYPO3 project.
And when we're talking about being involved, there was a rumor that you set out with a certain goal at an event to get so many people signed up for the association. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what the result was?
Yeah, that was at last year's developer days, where we had a campaign to try to sign up new community members, because we were hovering just under 1,000 members for the association. And through that, we managed to pass the 1,000 member mark, and we're now stably over 1,000 members in the TYPO3 Association. And I think another really important thing that has happened in the last year, and that we saw in the General Assembly, was that the TYPO3 Association, for the first time, reached a budget of 1 million euros. All of that money is money that comes in through memberships.
Well, that is incredible. I mean, I think that there is so much more that could be talked about in terms of, involvement from even before becoming a member and all the way up to, running for a position on the board. So, I had a really good time at the General Assembly myself. I learned a lot about the format, the state of the association, how the GmbH is playing a part. And so for me, it was very informative as a newcomer. And I thought the discourse was really productive as well. So thank you so much for speaking with me today about this. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have safe travels.
Thank you so much, and many greetings from the e-governance conference in Estonia.
Well, thank you so much, Mathias, and I hope you're feeling better as well.
I am, definitely.
Thanks, Kendall. And now a message from our second agency partner, diemedialen.
diemedialen is a full-service online agency based in Cologne and Bonn that specializes in web design, development, and online marketing. With over 20 years of experience, they offer a one-stop solution for comprehensive online projects focusing on sustainable digitalization for long-term success. Their approach integrates a 360 perspective on digital communication, ensuring that projects are economically viable, socially responsible, and environmentally friendly. They are TYPO3 Association Gold members, recognized as a trusted agency by the Bundesverband Digitale Wirtschaft and Google Partner. Discover the future of digital solutions at diemedialen.de and see how they can help achieve your goals.
Next up, I sit down with former TYPO3 community manager Ben van Tander to find out about the early days of the General Assembly and his work as a community manager. Ben, a very warm welcome to the show. It's really nice to speak to you again. I think the last time I saw you in person was last year at the 25th anniversary. So thanks for stopping by today.
Yeah, no worries. Always a pleasure, Tom. We've been in contact, I think, way back when, numerous times, as I tried to get you into the TYPO3 community from a UK perspective, right?
Yeah, and you didn't do a bad job of that at all. So thank you very much. Ben, I've got lots of questions I want to ask you about today. Unfortunately, none of them include last week's Eurovision Song Contest, unfortunately. But, well, that's for another day, perhaps. But I guess today's talk, or why I asked you to come on, was kind of talk a little bit about community and your role as a community manager over the last 15 or 20 years or so. Yeah. And I wanted to try and speak to you a little bit about the General Assembly from your perspective back in the early 2000s and the early 2010s as well. So if we could go back and start with the General Assembly. Could you tell me some of your earliest memories of it as both as an organizer and an attendee?
Okay, probably the thing that stuck with me most is the General Assembly that we had way back then in Zurich, because the view was so beautiful. And it wasn't the first, I guess it was something like the third or the fourth one, probably, and that was just gorgeous. And I haven't been there for a very long time, but it's my guess that the format didn't really change a lot in the years. Let me put it like this. I think the GA is something that is an official event, but as usual, we as community members, we always love to go to the GA and meet each other. So I guess, the there were the points, that we necessarily had to do, vote on this or vote on that, and the budget is okay, and la di la. And there was an hour or so, or 2 hours doing the official business. And then it was back to having a beer, having a coffee, and then socializing. So I guess especially in the beginning, when the community didn't evolve, so to speak, or hadn't evolved, the GA was, I think, the point where the people that were most involved in the community met. So I think it's definitely important.
So you were the community manager for TYPO3 for about 4 or 5 years, is that right?
5 years officially, but I guess kind of in the run-up to being official manager, community manager there, I supported the community in various ways. So I think what might be interesting, I think due to TYPO3 that I got involved into that profession, so to speak. Maybe that's interesting to give your listeners a bit of an idea about that, because it must have been at one of the board meetings way back when TYPO3 was working on version 5. And I don't know if the listeners realize that, but version 5 was always supposed to be the new and modern version. In the end, that turned out to be an altogether other project. And what happened back then is that we, with stakeholders, as everybody that was kind of involved in core development and you name it, there was this kind of idea that there's so much going on in the TYPO3 community. So many parallel projects, think of templating, form generation. So there were so many groups doing kind of the same thing, that there was this call for trying to align these projects. And then, as far as my memory serves me, I think within the push towards version 5, there was a separate budget available for doing communications around this. I remember gladly accepting that, because I think I was one of the people from the very beginning in the TYPO3 community that was not a developer, but was very much about testing functionality of the system, writing documentation and everything, not code oriented. And then I was granted this budget, and then I was thinking, what exactly is... I knew what my role was, of course, to kind of align these projects, extensions, or whatever you would want to call them. But what's the name for my function? So I do remember that in the beginning, I thought, maybe it's product manager. And I remember even having printed business cards with saying product manager. Where the core developer said, no, you know very little about the product itself, about the core functionality. Then I was kind of researching, this must have been back in 1999, what exactly is this function? Then I came across this book called The Art of Community by Jono Bacon. And then I stumbled across the term community manager. So I guess, around that time, it must have been a little bit after 2000, that there is something called a community manager. So there are people actually doing the things that I was doing.
And back then, were there any other open source projects doing something similar? Did they have community managers as well? Or do you think you were one of the first people to really drive that role?
Not the very first, but one of the first, I guess. Jono Bacon, back then, he was community manager for Ubuntu. There must have been maybe 2 hands full of that. I think at that point, I always were under the impression that maybe this is nice to historically analyze, but I think the community management itself found its origin in open source projects. But I think these days, if you would ask somebody, what do you think a community manager actually does, then you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers, because I think there's a lot of angles you can use in that profession, in community management as such.
And to this day, am I right in saying you're still working as a community manager right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think having left TYPO3 was something like the odd maybe 10 years ago. I did a little bit of writing after that. I kind of initiated the This Week in TYPO3 back then. I did a couple of that articles again. And since that time, I've been now involved in a small boutique communications agency called Age of Peers. And through the years, we did small projects for Red Hat. Elastic was a big client of ours. think until today, we're still working for the University of Vienna. That also kind of came across at one of the TYPO3 camps. So still, yeah, and I think the last job that I did was really interesting. I worked for an energy provider here in the Netherlands called Alliander, which is closely related to the Linux Foundation Energy. Very interesting topic. Yeah, so still, I think when I started with community management back then in TYPO3, and I was kind of born to do that.
So if you compared your typical week as a community manager with TYPO3, say in the early 2010s, and you compare it to the kind of work you would do now, what would you say are the biggest differences in your typical work week?
For me back then, it was very much about contacting different groups, and I think what I found really effective or beneficial for the community is writing this week in TYPO3. So really inquiring with people, what are you doing? What do you hope to achieve with this? Let's write an article about this and try to create some more exposure, and being at the TYPO3 camps and. Trying to support people, with any of the wishes that they had with regards to TYPO3. And I think I don't know if Tom, if you can speak so much about what has changed in the role, but for me personally, what has changed is that what we currently do is doing a full spectrum of services around communication. So community management by itself is only one part of growing your community. So writing use cases, white papers. We also do something that's called a neighborhood survey, which I think is very important for you as any project, be it a CMS or what other project. You really need to be aware of your positioning in the market, and things like community management, media relations, communication, all play a vital role there. But for me personally, I'm a people person. I like to connect people to each other, and that hasn't changed.
Ben, I think that's it for this conversation. Thank you for stopping by. Before we wrap things up, I just want to ask you 3 very quick questions.
Yeah.
What's from your perspective at least, what's the current state of TYPO3 in the Netherlands?
I really got re-engaged because I saw a lot of enthusiasm coming from TYPO3 GmbH, or from the company that's has been erected around TYPO3. I do hope I can play a part in keeping the community spirit alive, because I've worked with a lot of companies. So I think the TYPO3 story is so interesting, because it was, the community still plays a very important part, but it is a company. And I've worked for a lot of companies. And I think, when a company really grows large, like in the case for like LEsniak, for instance, it's not a fun thing anymore, because then the commercial aspects get so important.
And will we see you at the developer days, and will we see you at T3Con this year as well?
Yeah. I think both. Yeah. So the reason, I've been in contact with somebody at the developer days. What I used to do with some of the events we had, because a lot of people shared their knowledge on extension building or their technical knowledge. I used to do some yoga workshops there. I'm not by no means a certified yoga professional, but I've been doing that for a very long time, so I know my stuff. That's probably what I'll be there for at the TYPO3 developer days. And I'll be there at the con, because I'm currently also doing a little bit of community management for a Dutch TYPO3 municipality-oriented organization, which is about to turn into a general TYPO3 for the Netherlands organization. So I'll be there.
Ben, thank you again for stopping by. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I will hopefully see you in Karlsruhe in August. Thank you.
Vice versa. Thank you very much, Tom. See you.
Next, I wanted to share some important news about changes that have been made to the nomination process for this year's T3Con Awards. Having received over 200 nominations last year, and listening to the feedback from the community, the TYPO3 GmbH have decided to increase the number of categories by 4, giving participants more ways for their projects to be recognised. The 4 new categories are Intranet and Extranet, Media News and Publishing, legacy and heritage, and lastly, best TYPO3 camp, a way of recognising self-organised TYPO3 camps that have taken place over the last year. The submission process is now open, giving people what we hope is enough time to complete their projects and get them submitted on time. Head over to t3con24.typo3.com to find out more. Well, that was a long one. If you made it this far, a big T3 kudos to you. As always, thanks for listening, and if you have any feedback or suggestions, please get in touch with us at podcast@typo3.com. But until next time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Take care.